It's the long-awaited essay question. It's 25 marks, but don't be worried, it's actually much easier than you would think. We need to start off by looking at the mark scheme and the way that marks are awarded for it, and then we can find out what are your biggest obstacles to absolute success in this area of the specification. So what happens is when the examiner gets your essay, they're going to look in the first level of response and they're going to decide, do you meet it? Could you possibly meet the next level up? So let's just have a little look at it. It says if you were going to get less than 5 marks, hopefully we won't, that the response only indirectly addresses the theme of the question and merely represents a series of biological facts which are usually descriptive or poorly explained and at times may be factually incorrect. Now actually it's easier than you would think to end up in this bracket because there's a big difference in the titles between the role of proteins, for example, and the importance of proteins. And very much now they're going down the route of the importance of, because it's a lot more analytical than just describing the role of. So some of my students in the past have written me what they thought were fabulous essays. When I've marked them, I've realised that they've written on the role of and not the importance of. What is the difference between those two titles? Well, the importance of is if you didn't have it, what wouldn't you be able to do? The role of is just descriptive and tells you what something does. So there's a difference there. So it's actually easier than you think to score only in this bottom bracket. Assuming you've hit those targets, you move to the next one up. This one says only one or a few aspects are covered. Now, in your essay, you need to cover 4 areas of your specification. What does that mean? If your specification looks like this is an area of your spec. So the easiest way for you to make sure that you've chosen 4 separate areas, I tell my students, always try and include plants, include something from AS, include something from A2, something at the beginning of the course, something at the end of the course. That way you're making sure it's synoptic, that it's in topics that are clearly spread through the whole of the specification. Biology presented shows some superficial A-level content that may be poorly explained, lacking in detail, or showed limited use of appropriate terminology. That brings me to another point. When I read essays, any sentence that could be written by a lay person, in other words, somebody just out in the street who hasn't studied year 13 biology, I just cross it out. You're wasting your time. Any sentence that's of GCSE level, cross it out. You're wasting your time. Every single sentence needs to be loaded with subject-specific vocabulary, and it needs to demonstrate that you've been in year 13. You only have about 35 minutes to write this essay, so you need 4 paragraphs from different areas of the specification. You don't need an introduction, you don't need a conclusion, but you just need 4 different areas, and go straight into it, A-level content. May contain a number of significant errors and or irrelevant topics. Now this is actually one of your biggest enemies, the idea of irrelevance. It's really easy to start banging on about something that isn't answering the exam question. So large paragraphs that don't bear any relation to what you're trying to answer in the first place will mean that you end up not being able to move up to the next descriptor. Now, this is the bracket where most students in the UK end up with their mark. I think last year the mean grade was something like 13.7 out of the 25. So let's have a little look. Several aspects are covered, but they are unrelated. Each paragraph is actually a standalone, separate analysis of that part of the specification. The topics don't need to be linked in any which way. What this statement means is that they're unrelated to the exam question itself. The response mostly deals with suitable topics, but they are not interrelated and links are not made to the theme of the question. That is poorly worded. AQA have clarified that you don't have to roll one paragraph onto the next. The paragraphs don't need to be interrelated. The paragraph needs to be related to the title of the essay. And biology is usually correct A-level content, though it lacks detail. It is usually clearly explained and generally uses appropriate terminology. Yes, you do need to go into a level of detail, but again, not just big, long, descriptive processes. You need to be explaining the importance of them. The next bracket, 16 to 20. Response links several topics to the main theme of the question to form a series of interrelated points which are clearly explained. Okay, that makes sense, it's self-explanatory. You need four topics. The biology is fundamentally correct A-level content and contains some points which are detailed, though there may be some which are less well developed with appropriate use of terminology. So in actual fact, that doesn't sound too difficult. You can still get up to 20 marks being detailed in one or two of your paragraphs and less details in the other two. Doesn't sound too bad to me. Perhaps one significant error and or one irrelevant topic which detracts from the overall quality of the answer. So again, you still get to make those boo-boos and you still get to get 20 out of 25. How do we get into that uppermost category for marks? The response shows a holistic approach to the question with a fully integrated answer. So what I tell my students, again, I mentioned it earlier, holistic approach. As well as doing organisms, you might be talking about nerves, you might be talking about proteins. Also extend the essay on to include plants. That helps to make it holistic. Choose topics from AS, choose topics from A2. Here it says it makes clear links between several different topics and the theme of the question. So I tell my students that in the beginning of their paragraph, if they've been asked, for example, to do an essay on proteins, then if they were going to talk about hemoglobin, they would say, hemoglobin is a globular protein. Boom. It's explaining why that paragraph you're writing about hemoglobin is linked to the title. You can't expect the examiner to just click on that hemoglobin is a protein and that's why you're writing about it. So we've got to be explicit. And I think that's a key point. Be explicit all the way through. Don't dress it up with fancy language. It's much more important that you use scientific vocabulary, that you cut out the irrelevant, and that every sentence is an A-level sentence. The biology is detailed and comprehensive A-level content, uses appropriate terminology, and is very well written and always clearly explained. No significant errors or irrelevant material. And for top marks in the band, the answer shows evidence of reading beyond the specification requirements. So what you do is this: you go to your A-level textbook, and in there they've got the little plus sign, the purple plus, and it means it's stuff from beyond the specification. So don't go necessarily searching on the internet, because it's very difficult to find things that aren't too far beyond the A-level depth. We want to find things that are beyond the A-level in terms of breadth. And you can find those in the textbook with the little purple blue cross. When you've got maybe 3 or 4 good examples of that, you can kind of anchor them into any essay. And when you go beyond the specification, you can either write a full paragraph or you can just write 1 or 2 sentences that demonstrate that you have gone beyond the specification. So it doesn't need to be a whole chunk of a paragraph. When you go beyond the specification, be, again, explicit. Write beyond the specification, boom, in it goes. So when that examiner is marking it on a tired afternoon living in Halifax or whatever it is, it's raining outside and the kids in the next room are kicking up a fuss, it's there and they see it, they don't miss it, boom, they've got the marks. In my next video, I'm going to show you an essay that scored 25 out of 25. How do I know that? Because one of the things I ask our students to do, especially when they move from AS to A2, is to request their script back. In this school, if you're paying £20,000 for a year for your education, then paying 50 quid for your script back is the best money spent. You can really analyse what you wrote. Sometimes when we want to see what they wrote in the essay, we'll request their script back, and then we've got a very firm mark that we can attach to it.